Hack 206A. I work at a hotel and the heater for my indoor hotel pool blew the rollout switch, I thought. However, when I went to remove it, I found that it had been bypassed, tying the wire coming in to the wire going out together. At this point, I cleaned the inside. It was mostly rust and corrosion, as I could replace the rollout valve. After sparking a few times, the heater ignited and ran for about 45 minutes, and then it blew the blowout valve again. I bought a new pilot light and thermocouple that I'm going to install today. Will this fix my problem?
I do not think that's going to fix your problem. What it sounds like to me is if that flame rollout is burning out, what's happening is something is restricting the airflow after the water or the air combusts and it heats and it flows up through the heat exchanger, it then exhausts its way out. So one of a number of things could be happening. Either there's not an exhaust fan, or there is an exhaust fan that's not working properly, or you have venting that's improperly sized or has been modified along the way. But what's happening is because that flame, after it burns and it goes up through that heat exchanger, it either can't get out, or you're having it. Maybe you would notice that this happens in certain weather. I'm assuming this is an indoor system. Doesn't mean that it could be even outdoor. But what happens if you get a downdraft at all? If you have, maybe you guys just put up a new fence or something's changed in the area there where as it gets windy, it's downdrafting through whatever the exhaust system is, and it's pushing that flame down. And when it pushes that flame down, that flame rolls out in front of the heater and it hits that and immediately shuts off. Otherwise, everything would catch on fire. So something is happening on the exhaust end after the gas has combusted, and it's forcing that flame rollout, as it's called. It's forcing that to come out from the combustion chamber on the underside and rolling up the front of the heater and burning out that unit. So just by replacing a pilot or a thermocouple or any of the components in there, that's not going to help you. In this case, you have to look at what's happening on the exhaust end. A couple simple solutions potentially. If this is an outdoor heater, let's start with that as an outdoor heater, and it doesn't have a vent hood and it just has the traditional venting that came with the heater itself, you may need to put a vent hood that prevents that. And a lot of the older heaters we had challenges with in terms of venting. Raypak rarely has a venting problem. But the only well, actually, I did just come up with something else. The likelihood, though, of it something happening atmospherically is the number one, more than likely, or something changed in the exhaust pattern. The other possibility doesn't make a ton of sense, but it's possible that your heat exchanger itself is plugged. So if you have a mouse that went up inside there and this heater was down for any period of time and a mouse crawled up there and built a nest in there, and now what's happening is that heat's not able to rise and go through the heat exchanger. It's being forced down. On occasion, and you get any change in atmospheric pressure, sometimes that flame is going to want to roll out as well. So I would look at heat exchanger and the exhaust side of things before I replaced any more components. Other than you will have to replace that flame rollout.
Should you ever bypass a flame rollout, and at what point of rust and corrosion and problems should you replace the heater?
Well, if you have a lot of internal corrosion in the heater anyway, it's just a matter of time. And you should never, ever, any under circumstances, eliminate that flame rollout. I've seen people do it, and I kind of know why they've done it. And maybe a really short term is not necessarily a bad thing, but I would never recommend it. That is a fail safe for sure, that if that's not in place and anything catches on fire on the inside of that heater, it is not going to shut that gas off, and that gas is going to continue to run. So had that happened, had you had a rollout, which maybe you've been having consistently and not knowing, and fortunately you didn't catch everything on fire. But if that flame rolled out and caught any component, the plastic on a wire or anything on fire, your gas valve would never shut off. And if it doesn't shut off, it's literally adding fuel to the fire. So bad idea. And in terms of the replacement, you may have to replace it, because if this is a heater, obviously with rust and some things going on in there, it's an older heater that likely does not have replacement parts. So much has changed in the code that we can't get a lot of the parts, if any of the parts anymore, for older heaters, because efficiencies have had to be brought up. The standards have been brought up. The electronic ignition has been a requirement now for a number of years. So you can't even buy a lot of those old parts and heater things. You can buy replacement parts in some cases to Frankenstein things together, but there's very few OEM parts for any older those are specific heaters. It's just too hard to find them. And at that point, if you start having to piecemeal it like that, it's time probably to just upgrade and be done with it and get yourself a brand new heater and start with that.